Money doesn't just buy things, it buys silence. That's what I'd learned. It buys the hushed reverence of a boardroom, the soundproofing of a penthouse, the discreet distance of bodyguards. It had bought me a fortress of solitude, and tonight, walking through the private park my real estate company owned, the silence was almost absolute. The only sounds were the crisp crunch of my Oxfords on the frost-kissed gravel and the distant, muted hum of the city I practically owned. I'm Elias Vance, the architect of a tech empire built on ruthless logic and cold, hard data. Phantoms and feelings were variables I had deleted from my life's algorithm years ago. If you're captivated by a story where the past refuses to stay buried, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to my channel, Philip_W Stories, for the next chapter. Your support brings these words to life. And then I saw her, and every logical circuit in my brain shorted out. It was Lena. She was sitting on a bench, huddled against the cold, her profile illuminated by the soft glow of a nearby lamppost. 5 years. It had been 5 years since the crash, since I'd seen that face outside of the nightmares that my money couldn't silence. She was wearing the same cherry red wool coat she'd loved, the one I'd told her made her look like a classic film star. My breath hitched, a physical pain in my chest. This wasn't a memory. This was flesh. This was real. And then I saw the children. A boy and a girl, tucked against her sides, their small faces pale with cold. They couldn't have been more than 4. My mind, the billion-dollar supercomputer that could predict market trends, went completely blank. I stared, frozen, as the little girl shivered and buried her face in Lena's coat. My eyes, traitors that they were, traced the lines of their faces. The boy had her nose. The girl had my mother's determined chin. This was impossible. A cruel trick of the light, a stress-induced hallucination. I had the coroner's report. I had paid for the headstones. Then Lena moved. She pulled out a phone, a cheap, outdated model with a spiderweb of cracks across the screen. Her fingers, blue-tipped from the cold, began to type. A frantic, desperate tapping. At that exact moment, my own phone, a custom titanium slab in my pocket, buzzed. A notification glowed on the screen. Unknown number. Is there any shelter available tonight? We can't stay out in this cold. Please. The world stopped. The air vanished from my lungs. I looked from the text on my screen to the woman on the bench, typing the same plea. Lena? The name was a ragged whisper, torn from a place inside me I thought had died in that car wreck. Her head snapped up. Her eyes, wide and impossibly sad, locked directly onto mine. In them, I saw the ghost of our love, the echo of our final argument, and a depth of sorrow that shattered the last of my composure. I took a stumbling step forward, my hand outstretched. And they were gone. The bench was empty. Utterly, completely empty. No indentations on the wood, no lingering warmth. Nothing. Just the cold silence and the frantic beating of my own heart, thumping a frantic, terrified rhythm against my ribs. I, Elias Vance, was standing alone in the freezing dark, talking to an empty bench, a ghostly text message burning a hole in my pocket. Logic. It was the foundation of my empire, the bedrock of my existence. Back in the sterile, silent expanse of my penthouse, I clung to it like a lifeline. I stood before the floor-to-ceiling window, the glittering cityscape below a testament to my rational mind. But the skyline was just a blur. All I could see was the ghost of my own reflection, superimposed with her face. A hallucination. It had to be. The stress of the merger, the sleep deprivation. My mind had concocted a cruel, personalized hell. My doctor, on a secure video call, agreed. Extreme stress can manifest in profound ways, Elias. Vivid waking dreams, psychosomatic episodes. I'm prescribing a sedative. I ended the call without taking the prescription. Pills couldn't erase what I'd seen. Security. Run the feeds. I barked into my intercom, my voice sharper than I intended. The west quadrant of the private park. Between 7:05 and 7:15 p.m. I want every angle. My head of security, a man named Evans whose salary could fund a small nation, responded with military precision. Right away, Mr. Vance. While I waited, I did what I do best. I analyzed the data. I pulled the digital files I kept encrypted in a secure server, the ones I paid a fortune to make disappear from public record. The coroner's report. Lena Petrova, deceased. Cause of death, blunt force trauma. The addendum, the one that haunted my every waking moment. Deceased twin fetuses approximate 24 weeks gestation. The words were final. They were fact. They were my truth. My intercom buzzed. Sir? The footage. Evans's voice was carefully neutral. There's nothing. The cameras logged motion of you entering and leaving the park. But the bench, it's empty for the entire duration. There's no one there. A cold dread, deeper than the winter chill, seeped into my bones. It wasn't a trick of the light. It wasn't a stressed dream. The camera saw nothing, but I had seen everything. This was something else. Something my logic couldn't process. That night, sleep offered no refuge. I was back in the car. The rain was a solid sheet against the windshield. Lena was yelling, her voice raw with tears. "You care more about your empire than us, Elias." I snapped back, my eyes leaving the road for a fatal second to glare at her, to make her understand. The headlights of the oncoming truck were sudden, blinding. The screech of tires was a scream. Then the crushing silence. I woke up with a gasp, my own scream echoing in the dark, empty bedroom. The sheets were soaked with sweat. The next day the haunting evolved. I was in my office reviewing a contract worth billions. I looked up, and in the pristine reflective surface of the window I saw them. They were standing behind me in the room. Lena had a hand on each twin's shoulder. Their faces were pale, their eyes fixed on me. I spun around, my heart hammering against my ribs. The office was empty. I stood there, panting, the multi-billion-dollar contract forgotten in my trembling hands. The reflection had been crystal clear. This was no longer a single, isolated event. It was an infestation. A ghostly audit of my soul, and I was failing spectacularly. The billionaire was losing control. And the worst part was the dawning, terrifying realization. This wasn't a mental illness. This was real. And they weren't going away. A week passed. I became a ghost in my own life. I canceled meetings. I delegated billion-dollar decisions to my board. The empire I had built with blood and ambition now felt like a distant, irrelevant noise. My only reality was the silence of my penthouse and the specters that shattered it. I am a man of solutions. If this was a problem, I would solve it. If it was a sickness, I would find a cure. And so, I hired 2 new consultants, their fees added to the mountain of my guilt. The first was Dr. Eris, a parapsychologist. Her website was minimalist, her credentials impeccable, and her demeanor over our video call was unnervingly calm. "Apparitions are often tethered by unresolved emotion, Mr. Vance," she explained, her voice serene. "They are not here to harm but to communicate. You must ask yourself, what is the shelter they seek? It is rarely a physical place." The second was a psychologist, Dr. Miles, who specialized in traumatic grief. "Elias," he said, leaning forward, "the mind is a powerful thing. It can manifest your profound guilt as a tangible presence. You need to forgive yourself. Have you ever truly grieved?" I dismissed them both, yet their words festered. Shelter. Grief. Meaningless words. I needed data. I needed proof. Driven by a grim compulsion, I did something I had avoided for 5 years. I went to the cemetery. The Vance family plot was a sprawling, manicured atrocity of marble and granite. And there, tucked off to the side, was a simpler, elegant headstone. Lena Petrova. Beloved daughter. A light extinguished too soon. And beneath it, a smaller, heartbreaking plaque. The twins forever loved. The official story was a tragic accident. A beloved daughter, lost with her unborn children. There was no mention of the reckless father. The lying billionaire. The murderer. Seeing my own name on the family monument felt like a desecration. I had paid for this stone, this lie. The weight of it hit me like a physical blow, and I stumbled to my knees, the cold seeping through my tailored trousers. I retched, but there was nothing in my stomach to expel but the acid of my own remorse. That night, the haunting took a more intimate, terrifying turn. I was lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, when the air in the room grew frigid. I turned my head on the pillow. They were at the foot of my bed. The twins. They were translucent, shimmering in the moonlight filtering through the window. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. The little boy, his eyes a mirror of my own, slowly raised his hand. He pointed a tiny ethereal finger directly at my chest. Then, in unison, they both turned and pointed toward the large window, in the exact direction of the winding coastal road where our lives had ended. The message was undeniable, seared into my soul. Go back. A cold more profound than any winter chill locked my joints. This was no longer about seeing them. It was about obeying. Dr. Eris was right. They were tethered, and I was the anchor. And I knew, with a certainty that shattered the last of my resistance, where I had to go. I had to return to the place where it all ended. The coastal road was a black ribbon under a moonless sky. I drove the same route at the same hour. The engine of my luxury car was a whisper, a stark contrast to the memory of screeching tires and shattering glass. Each mile marker was a countdown to my own personal hell. I was no longer a billionaire. I was a pilgrim returning to the scene of his original sin. I pulled over at the exact spot my private investigator's report had detailed years ago. The guardrail was still scarred, a permanent wound on the landscape. The air was cold and salt-laced, and the only sound was the distant rhythmic crash of waves against the cliffs below. They were waiting for me. Not on the road, but just beyond the torn guardrail, standing on the cliff's edge. Lena holding the hands of the twins. They were solid, real, their figures outlined by the faint starlight. They didn't look at me with anger, but with a profound, endless sadness that was somehow worse. "Lena," I breathed, my voice stolen by the wind. As I took a step forward, the world dissolved. It wasn't a memory I remembered. It was a memory I inhabited. I was her. The plush leather of the passenger seat was under my fingers. The argument was a storm around us. "You're never present, Elias. It's just money deals power. We're having a family, or did you forget?" The pain in my own voice, her voice, was a physical ache. I saw him, saw me, glare back, his face a mask of arrogant frustration. "You don't understand the pressure, Lena. I'm building an empire for us." "I don't want an empire. I want a husband." And then the terrifying lurch as his eyes left the road. The blinding glare of the truck's high beams filling the windshield, erasing everything. My hands, her hands, flew to my stomach, a primal protective instinct. A shield for the two lives fluttering within. There was no time for a scream. Only a single crystal-clear thought, a final message etched into the very fabric of the universe. "Tell him I forgive him." The vision shattered. I was on my knees on the cold, hard asphalt, gasping as if I'd been drowning. Sobs racked my body, violent and uncontrollable. I wasn't crying for myself. I was crying for her. For the love that had been in her heart even in that final, terrifying moment. For the forgiveness I had never earned and had been too cowardly to seek. They were gone. The cliff's edge was empty. But I finally understood. They weren't trapped by the crash. They were trapped by my guilt. By my refusal to acknowledge the truth of what I had done, and the truth of her love. My silence was their cage. My lie was the cold they couldn't escape. The shelter they needed wasn't made of bricks and mortar. It was built from honesty. It was built from atonement. And I knew, with a terrifying and absolute clarity, exactly how I had to build it. I stood before the mirror in my penthouse, but for the first time I didn't see a billionaire. I saw a man hollowed out by grief and rebuilt by a ghost's forgiveness. The suit I wore was my armor, but today I was taking it off. My PR team was buzzing in my ear, my board was waiting with expectant smiles. They thought I was about to announce another global acquisition, another vertical to dominate. They were about to watch me dismantle my own monument. The press conference was a sea of flashing lights and murmured speculation. I stepped up to the podium, the cold metal a stark contrast to the heat of my shame. I looked out at the hungry faces, the recorders, the cameras that would broadcast my confession to the world. "My name is Elias Vance," I began, my voice steady, clear, and carrying a weight it never had before. "And 5 years ago I killed the woman I loved." The room erupted. Gasps, shouts, the frantic clicking of cameras intensifying. I saw my board members turn pale. I plowed on, my eyes fixed on a point at the back of the room, seeing not the reporters but her. I was driving recklessly. We were arguing. I took my eyes off the road. I spoke the truth I had buried under layers of money and power. I named Lena. I named our children. I detailed the cover-up, the paid-off reports, the lies I had woven to protect my empire. I built my fortune on a foundation of a single, cowardly lie. And I have lived in a hell of my own making ever since. I resigned from every position, effective immediately. I watched, a strange sense of peace settling over me, as the ticker on the financial news channel at the side of the room showed my company's stock price begin its precipitous fall. My empire was crumbling, and with every point it dropped, I felt lighter. With what remained of my personal wealth, still a fortune but now a tool, not a throne, I established the Lena Petrova Foundation. Its mission was simple, direct, and born from that text message on a cold park bench. To provide immediate, safe, and dignified shelter for homeless families. I didn't put my name on it. It was hers. It was my atonement, the physical shelter I had failed to provide in life. Weeks later, on a warm spring day, I found myself walking back to that park bench. The city noise felt different now, less like a demand and more like a hum of life. I sat down, the wood, warm from the sun. I closed my eyes, breathing in the scent of blooming flowers instead of the chill of regret. I felt a presence then. Not a cold shiver, but a wave of profound warmth that washed over me, soothing the last frayed edges of my soul. There was no figure, no voice, but the message was as clear as it had been on the cliffside. It was a feeling of release, of a lock finally clicking open, of a journey ended. They were free. And in freeing them, I had finally freed myself. I opened my eyes, a single quiet tear tracing a path down my cheek. It wasn't a tear of sadness but of release. I finally built them a shelter. And in doing so I built one for my soul.